Hi, everybody. This is Fred Meyer with Writers.com, and I'm here with our instructor, Jennifer Billock. Jennifer is a food writer and a travel writer, and for Writers.com, she teaches a very popular food writing course. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for making time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I thought I'd do here is be essentially an empty vessel for food writing knowledge. So really the question is, what are the first 10 things or 5 things, whatever the number is, that I should know about food writing if I have an interest in it?
Okay, well, the first thing is that comes to mind is that you'd have to be willing to eat a lot of different things, and sometimes not super pleasant things. Like for example, I just ate tarantulas, and they were surprisingly good, which was nice.
What?
Yeah, I was in Vietnam or Cambodia. I don't know where it was, but
Are
so
they like a delicacy there, or is it sort of like we dare you
it's
to
like
eat a
street
tarantula?
food. Yeah, it's street food more or
Really?
less. Yeah. So
And
it
it's not
was,
like a novelty street food. They're like, do you want potato chips or tarantulas?
yeah, basically. And there's
Wow.
all sorts of bugs that they eat, which is great. So so I've eaten a lot of bugs in my lifetime. So it's important to know if you're going to be a food writer that you can't really be super picky about what you're going to eat because it limits what you're going to write about and what you have to say. And I mean, unless you have like a blog of I'm the pickiest eater on the planet and I won't eat anything and here's what I do. But um yeah, so there's that. And then this is kind of just a stream of consciousness thing. um so the next thing is, when you're writing, you try to be creative with what you're saying. So instead of saying something tastes good or something has, a robust flavor, try and phrase it in a different way. Like I like to tell my students not to try and not use the word taste or flavor, and explain it some way that's more lyrical. And off the top of my head, I really can't give you an example. um,
What does
but
tarantula taste like, out of
it tastes like
curiosity?
teriyaki, honestly. Like,
What?
so you gotta, they're a little gross. You have to take the little butt end off that has like the stinger or whatever on it, because that part is supposedly very bitter. And then it's fried, so it's all hollow inside. Because I was concerned that it was gonna like,
Yeah,
burst.
burst out. Yeah.
Yeah, but so it's fried and everything is hollow and it's just really crispy. Like if like when you get a teriyaki chicken or something and then there's like leftover bits of burnt teriyaki in the pan, it tastes like that. So yeah, so it's pretty good. um yeah, so there's that. There's try to be lyrical with your writing. um the other thing is don't expect to just write food reviews if you want to be a food writer.
Hmm.
It encompasses so many different things, like writing recipes, editing recipes, writing articles about chefs, writing um, articles about the history of a certain cuisine, and then there's the restaurant reviews. So there's a whole range of different styles of food writing. One of my favorites is food memoir, which is kind of pulling out a special moment about food in your life and crafting a personal story around it, which always ends up being really touching. One of my students once wrote about, I think it was tomatoes on cereal that she ate as a foreign exchange student. I think my details might be a little off, but it was just a really interesting story about how two different cultures were coming together, um, and brought out the point that food is universal, whether it's the type of cuisine that you enjoy or the type of cuisine that other people enjoy. Um, so yeah, let me think what else there is.
Well, I'm very curious about some of the things you said.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned not just writing food reviews,
Mhm.
um, but chef profiles, food memoir. Um, and you said, don't just tunnel in on food reviews if you want to be a food writer. when you say that, do you mean to be a professional food writer, somebody who makes it part or all of their livelihood, or is it just as a food writer, even if you're just doing it as a hobby, you're constraining yourself if you just write restaurant reviews?
I would say that in every realm, you're going to constrain yourself if you just write food reviews. But professionally, if you just want to focus 100% on food as your career, then you're definitely going to need to diversify outside of the restaurant review category, because there's too many restaurant reviewers, not enough restaurants. But like if you're keeping a blog that's just restaurant reviews, that would probably be more reliable to kind of give yourself that niche. But otherwise, to make a full-time living out of it, you would want to write everything about food.
I'm curious about the education side. When I read, I guess, especially food reviews of high-end restaurants, I get the sense that the reviewer is formally trained in some way, but I don't know. I don't know what way. Have they just eaten a lot of places, or did they
It's a
maybe go to chef school and drop out? How does that work?
It really depends on the reviewer. Some of them have gone to culinary school. Some of them are trained journalists. Some of them have just, written and eaten so much that they're able to speak about it in a really interesting way. For me, I don't have proper culinary training. I was a pastry chef for a little bit, but I learned that on the job. I am personally trained in journalism. So for me, I have that journalism background, more so than I have the culinary background. But it's really different for everybody, depending on the writer.
That lyrical piece you mentioned earlier feels like sort of the heart of it. It's like it's such a strange um, niche within writing where you're always referring to a sense perception, I think, in some way. And it's so hard. It's so hard to. I read music reviews as well, and it's so hard to match words to what an album actually sounds like. You know.
Yeah.
So it feels like there's a bit of a puzzle there. How do you learn how to or what's the goal? Is it to give people as clear a sense of the experience as you can, or is it to write kind of good literature and it's not, I mean, it's not going to tell you what a strawberry tastes like, but it might be beautifully written. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. I think the goal is to, you know, make it be good literature, something that's entertaining to read, that's not just oh, I went here, I tasted this, it was nice. But also to impart to the reader, what they're going to have and what their experience is going to be like. So if you can, really engage all of your senses, like your sense of smell, sight, touch, mouth, feel. I don't think that's one of the senses. But if you can engage all of that and try to make comparisons in your mind about, what does this taste like? What does it feel like in my mouth? What does it smell like? And then you can kind of turn that into something that's going to give the reader a better idea of exactly what they're about to eat, more or
Hmm.
less. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. Yeah. I always wonder how much, how reliable do you think? I always wonder about food and wine reviewers. How reliable are they? Is it just kind of the mood they're in that day often? Because, hunger is such a variable thing. Like, have you ever eaten like maybe baked mac and cheese and for the first maybe 1,500 calories, it's like the best thing you've ever experienced. And then, you know what I mean?
1,500
So,
calories.
yeah, yeah. So I always, yeah. So I always wonder, is that something that food writers worry about? Is that kind of variability in their own experience?
I think when you're first starting out, it can be a factor. Like I remember when I first started out and I had to write an article about like the 12 best burgers in some city. And by like the third burger that day, I was just so annoyed that I was still eating burgers that, that it kind of like just, started to be unpleasant. But that was one of the first food articles I wrote. And the more experience you get with it, you're able to kind of separate your emotions and how you're feeling from what the food experience is. And that's because the more that you eat and the more that you write about it, the more you start to learn what certain things should taste like and the best ways for them to be prepared and things like that. So you can start looking at it from an analytical viewpoint instead of just emotional, more or less.
Do you find that changes your experience of food? Do you get sort of a distance from food when you have that? So for example, I used to do stand-up comedy, and a lot of the time when I watch comedy, I have kind of like an analytical distance from it. And I almost wonder if the immediate enjoyment of it is a little bit changed by that.
I feel like that's a possibility. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of similar as like people getting jaded in something and just not really being able to fully experience it. So you have to watch that. And I think one of the ways to get around it is that if you find that you're not enjoying food anymore, or that you're not having as good of a culinary experience, then try, writing about food in a different way for a while and just give yourself a self-imposed break. So like you could start doing chef profiles or write about unique food producers instead of, going out to restaurants and eating and being like, okay, I've eaten another meal.
Can I ask how you got started in food writing and how you recommend others get started?
Yeah, so I had an internship. Well, before that, so I went to my undergraduate degree is in journalism, and I always wanted to write about food because I love to eat. So I had emailed a few different local food publications in Chicago where I was going to school and asked them if they needed writers, and one of them came back and said yes. So I started writing event coverage and restaurant reviews for that publication. And then after that, I went to grad school also in Chicago and got an internship with a food and tourism magazine there. So I was able to write more food articles that way. So if you want to get started, there are a couple different routes you can take. You could go the blogging route where, you start your own thing and you just work on it as much as you can until it's got a good readership and advertising and lots of views and things like that, and then kind of branch out from there. Or you could try and get an internship with a food publication, which might be difficult if you don't already have some writing experience or you're not in school for writing, kind of. Internships are iffy sometimes. But and realistically, the best way to start is just to start writing. Like go out with your friends, have a dinner, come home, write about it in a journal or something, and see what comes up. Because you don't need to be an established journalist to start writing. You don't need a ton of clips or credits to your name. You just need to have the drive to do it and the ability to convince an editor to let you write about it. So it's charisma, maybe.
What further advice can you give about the practicalities, I suppose, of just finding your way in food writing, whether that means finding a readership or, yeah, how does that go for people, once they have taken the first step and maybe written their first few articles?
From there, do you mean like finding? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Yeah, it's a pretty big question. I guess if I wanted to make my way as a food writer, what does that even mean? And how do I do it? And, is it kind of luck? Is it knowing the right people? Is it really pounding the pavement and writing 100 food reviews and doing that thing where you walk into like a smoky, dimly lit office and you drop this giant manuscript on a man's desk? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's kind of a combination. There's a lot of writing a ton of stuff to hone your craft, and then pounding the pavement as far as digitally doing it, where you're finding editors' names online or in magazines and sending them emails to pitch them stories. So, I would suggest doing both. Write for yourself while you're trying to write for other people. And hopefully there is some luck involved. Hopefully it will eventually get you a break, which it usually does. If you if you're able to, craft a good piece about food and you can prove that in even just your query to an editor, then you'll get work.
Got it. Okay, maybe I thought I could ask a few just like little one-off questions and see what comes up.
Yeah.
What's the most helpful single thing you've ever learned about food writing?
Oh, that's a big question. Just to engage all your senses and not solely with the food, but also with the atmosphere of where you are. So if you're at an event or something like that, a food focused event, like note what all is going on around the room. Like as an example, one of the food events I covered, I was there just to have the food and to interact with, the people that were there and the chefs and things. But because I was engaged with my surroundings and aware of what was going on, I noticed this woman like completely smash an entire table of glasses on accident during a mojito demonstration. So, so that was something that, you should probably include. So it's good to, engage all your senses outside of exactly what you're there for.
What's your all-time favorite piece of food writing by yourself or another person? Or you could list one by yourself and one by another person.
Okay, let me see. By another person, I think one of my all-time favorite ones is the one I was telling you about earlier, where my student wrote about the tomato on cereal, which I just thought was so unique, and not a food tradition I had ever heard of. So it was it had that unexpected element to it. And then this is going to be a little silly. Another piece of food writing from someone else that I really like is, did you ever read the like viral Olive Garden review that's written by this old woman and
Oh
some
yeah, it was
little
like way
YouTuber?
over the top. It was like the bread was
I
profuse.
know, it's so amazing. It's so amazing. I love reading that. And then, gosh, I have 1,000. And then the Pete Wells review of Guy Fieri's restaurant is just a spectacular piece of literature. I mean, it's a little mean, but it's just the way he went about it is fascinating. Every single sentence in that piece is a question. Every single
Really?
sentence.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And that is a really unique way that I had never seen before of someone writing a review, which, it really lends itself to a super sarcastic and kind of narrative.
Right.
But,
Right.
but,
I'm actually so surprised. I've actually read these two reviews that you just mentioned.
yeah.
So the other one that comes to my mind is there's this New York restaurant called Per Se. I think it's
Okay.
like the most expensive restaurant in New York. And this apparently the quality has been declining. And a year or two ago, the New York Times came back in and reviewed it, and it was like this devastating like takedown of this restaurant. He compared there was a mushroom soup, and he said it was as murky and appetizing as bong water.
Oh, I read that. I read
Yeah.
that.
What did you think of that? It's like
I love, I mean, it really speaks to, not like using the word taste or flavor, but really
right.
in
It's
there
so vivid.
about
It's
how
so
things
vivid.
taste, whether it's good or bad. And it was very creative. It's
Yeah.
very creative.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
the only other one that I would mention is one that I wrote that I really am proud of is I wrote about what astronauts eat in space.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and they don't eat astronaut ice cream, which is unfortunate.
Oh,
But
Dippin' Dots, the ice cream of the
no,
future. They don't
the
eat.
dehydrated blocks
Oh,
of
it's just
ice cream. You can
they
get
don't
them at
eat
like
that.
the science museum or something like
Mm.
that. But,
So you
uh,
interviewed astronauts for that?
yeah, I interviewed
Cool.
a chef at NASA and a couple astronauts to get like what their favorite food is and how that food is prepared. And so it was more of a food science article, but it was just really interesting to do the research and write about in
Oh,
general.
that's really cool. I'll try to link to that in the notes
Yeah.
for this.
Okay.
I guess my last question, just sort of random, is what's the best food you've ever had, and what was it like?
Oh my goodness. You know, probably the best food that I've had that I can remember right now, because that's a big question, is a piece of veal that I had a Michelin starred restaurant in Paris, and it was like the lunch special. So so I thought, okay, this is gonna be because it's just the lunch special, but it was the most tender piece of veal I have ever had, and it was so well seasoned, and it came with this, not a gravy, but kind of like an au jus that just really brought out like the meatiness of it, and accentuated the whole thing, and it was just absolutely divine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Jennifer, anything else you'd like to share about food writing, the practicalities of it, the inspiration of it, the writing, just any piece of it?
Yeah, I'll share my general advice that I give to every writer who is interested in writing as a career is, if you want to write about food or whatever, just go for it. If that's your passion, then do it, and don't go into it with a mindset of you're going to be struggling forever and you're not going to make any money, because the instant you do that, you're giving yourself an out. So if you want to have food writing be your career, then have faith in yourself and go for it.
That's great advice. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Nice to talk to you. Oh, I'm hungry now. I bet that happens a lot.
I've been staring at this box of graham crackers over here.
Cool. Well, yeah, let me see what I can dig up in the fridge. And
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.